We have seen more projects. We have 25,000 units sitting waiting for their permits to be picked up.
How many?
25,000.
25,000 units.
Yes.
Approved.
Approved, and through the system. So it's not the municipality. I mean, we don't build anything. We can only put it to the approval stage, and I told the government this all through when anytime they actually took a chance to speak to us, which they didn't very much.
Hello, I'm Stuart McNish, and you're listening to Conversations Live. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series addressing the big issues of our time. For each episode, we bring together subject matter experts for a deep conversation designed to provide you with information that helps you make more informed decisions. I hope you enjoy it.
Last year at this time, the headlines were filled with real estate crisis stories. The province and the feds were making announcements upon announcements, more than 60 of them. Bill 44 was introduced with the idea that it would force municipal governments to increase density and speed up approval rates. It is legislation that was supposed to increase certainty of supply, stabilize prices, and boost construction. Did it work? That's what we're here to answer tonight. Welcome to Conversations Live. Tonight we come to you from Kemkemale, the land of many maples. These are the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish First Nations, whose people have lived on and continue to call these lands home. OCM. Conversations Live is a long-form public affairs dialogue series that seeks to advance our understanding of the big issues of our times. Our goal is to share ideas that help each of us gain a greater understanding of our communities, our province, our country. And we're only able to bring you these events in person and live online thanks to organizations that support programming for engaged citizens. You will see the logos and names of these organizations scroll across the bottom of the screen throughout this panel. I can't thank them enough. I can't thank them enough to the point where I'm going to name all of them right now. Our hosting sponsor tonight is McMillan LLP. And our other hosting sponsors throughout the series are KPMG and RBC. Our annual sponsors are BD Developments, Stem Cell Technologies, Rennie & Co., Landlord BC, the Pacific Salmon Foundation. Notice how I'm pausing in between just so that you can register each of these names. I'm very, very appreciative. TC Energy, Fortis BC, Polygon, Digital, Helijet, TELUS, and Marquee Wines, which are also contributing gift certificates to each of our panelists this evening, along with a device to open that bottle of wine. Our supporters are BCIT, Falkirk Consulting, The Goodman Report, OPI, and West Coast Reduction. We work in association with Mario Canseco of Research Co., and our media partner is the Vancouver Sun. Live streaming services are provided by Oh Boy Productions. As I say, without all of these organizations' generous support, this program would not be possible. One last little bit of business here before we get into the topic. For anyone wishing to submit a question, be it from our in-person audience, you in the room, or those who are joining us online, please go to slido.com, enter the code Conversations Live, and send in your question. I will receive your questions and share them with the panelists where I can. Now that said, I may not deliver your question verbatim, but I'll be motivated by your thoughts and ideas, and they'll help to shape some of my questions throughout the evening. Our topic tonight is real estate, especially here in the Lower Mainland, British Columbia in general, but really in the Lower Mainland. Where are we at? What has happened to the intense interest the province and the federal governments focused on this issue last year? Has the market cooled? Is housing more affordable? And how do you define affordability? Rents, where are they at? What is the stock of rental units? Are rental rates dropping or rising? Are developers stepping away from developing, or are they sitting on the sidelines? Are the banks pulling back, or are they waiting with money to invest? Are cities holding up the permitting process? Now, just before I introduce you to our panel, here is Mario Canseco of Research Co. with his poll on the way we're looking at the housing issue in British Columbia. Arav, can you run Mario's video?
The views of British Columbians on all issues related to housing have gone through a fluctuation over the last 12 months. Almost half of BC residents say they trust the BC New Democratic Party to deliver affordable housing, up 3 points since 2024. The BC Conservatives have seen their standing on this file increase dramatically, from 32% last year to 43% now. At the federal level, more than a third of BC residents express confidence in the Liberal and Conservative parties to manage this file, with the federal NDP dropping to a paltry 28%. The level of confidence on municipal governments fell to 38% across British Columbia. The policies implemented during the tenure of John Horgan as BC's premier remain popular almost 2.5 years into David Eby's tenure. More than 2/3 of residents agree with both the increase and expansion of the foreign buyers tax and with the introduction of a speculation tax. Support is lower, but still encompassing a majority of British Columbians for policies related to transfer taxes and homes valued at more than $3 million. Concerns about homelessness have increased across the province, with 4 in 5 British Columbians voicing agreement with building more modular supportive homes. At least 7 in 10 of the province's residents also endorse other policies implemented by the EB government, including a cap in rent increases, additional protection for financing and home inspections, and raising the fines for short-term rental hosts who fail to observe municipal bylaws. As was the case in 2024, policies related to strata age and rental restrictions, as well as banning homeowners from operating short-term rental businesses from afar, are not as well received. The federal government's ban on non-Canadians purchasing residential properties in Canada has grown in popularity. Almost 3 in 4 British Columbians are in favor of this policy, which will remain in place until 2027. This is one of those rare occasions in which agreement spans across party lines, with sizable proportions of BC residents who voted for the BC NDP, the BC Conservatives, or the BC Greens in last year's election endorsing Ottawa's actions. Concerns about immigration have jumped over the past year and a half across Canada. In British Columbia, which has been preoccupied about housing for longer than all other Canadian provinces, more than 7 in 10 residents believe the federal government should tie immigration numbers to affordable housing targets and new housing starts. Agreement with the renters' rebate has grown by 5 points in a year, while the notion of canceling the homeowner grant is less appealing than it was in 2024. The immense political divisions we saw in the 2024 provincial election persist in 2025, as identical proportions of British Columbians expect the housing policies of the provincial government to be either effective or ineffective. Once again, the province's youngest adults are more enthusiastic about the future success of these policies. Their older counterparts are decidedly more skeptical. For Conversations Live, I'm Mario Canseco from Research Co.
Well, thank you, Mario. Now to our panel. Burnaby Mayor Mike Hurley, Bob Rennie of Rennie Marketing, Chrystal of Polygon, Beau Jarvis of Wesgroup, and the inimitable Michael Geller. Now, just before we go to our first question, I'm going to roll one more clip. RF, can you roll the clip from Housing Minister Ravi Kahlon from last year's panel on housing? In it, he talks about creating predictability.
Now, I think part of the reforms that we've brought forward is about creating more predictability and getting the ability to get to decisions in a quicker way. And I would say, for example, the changes we've made around public hearings for projects that already fit within community plans, official community plans in communities. Now, I always have found it frustrating, and I've said this on many occasions, that we engage with our citizens. We say, here's the plan that we want as a community, here's where we want the housing. And then when somebody brings a proposal forward that already fits within that plan, we make them go through an entire process again. That unpredictability, that time delay, that's money. And that uncertainty is not helping us. And so that's just one reform, whether there's a cost reform, and so there's more predictability up front, so everyone knows what the cost is instead of later on. Those types of reforms, more predictability on what people are allowed to build, having communities make community plans that are 20-year plans for their growth, and doing that by engaging their communities. All these things are about reducing red tape, creating more certainty so that we can get housing built.
Well, Mayor Hurley, you head up a city that's been exceptionally good at doing all of those things for decades now. Is he right? Did he help to create more predictability?
Well, I can only speak for Burnaby, and no. Simple answer in Burnaby is no. I think it's created more uncertainty in the market, people waiting to see what will happen, and others sitting back to see if they're going to get a better deal because of what the province has said. So from a Burnaby perspective, I don't think we needed to be told how to do housing. We were pretty good at it. And I'm a big believer that all levels of government should stay in their lane and get good at what they're supposed to be good at, and then worry about what other levels of government do. So from my perspective, it has created more uncertainty. We have seen more projects. We have 25,000 units sitting waiting for their permits to be picked up.
How many?
25,000.
25,000 units.
Yes.
Approved.
Approved, and through the system. So it's not the municipality. I mean, we don't build anything. We can only put it to the approval stage. And I told the government this all through anytime they actually took a chance to speak to us, which they didn't very much. We can only approve. And once those approvals are made, how they get built is up to the market. The market will drive that, not municipalities. Now, I have to admit, there are a few municipalities that maybe weren't doing it as well as we were doing it, and that was the target of the provincial government. And that's why I say the one-size-fits-all that they have put in doesn't work. And it doesn't work for Burnaby especially. And so in those municipalities where they have these changes may help, and I say may because I'm not in their shoes, that's hundreds of smaller municipalities, it's hundreds of units. Whereas in Burnaby, you put in jeopardy thousands of units. So I'm not sure that the changes are really going to add up to too much in this uncertain times. And the one-size-fit-all is absolutely the wrong model, in my opinion.
Neil, how has this impacted your decision-making process?
Well, maybe I won't talk too much about Burnaby, but we're part of that 25,000. We've probably got about 1,500 units that are on hold because the economics don't work. But in terms of predictability, 2 years ago, we bought a piece of land in the township of Langley. We went through all the planning process. We created a community that would have 1,000 homes. Shortly after we bought that land, they changed their policy on community amenity charges, and they added about $25 million to the cost of the project. We figured some things out. We worked with the vendor. We got a price adjustment. We later brought in a not-for-profit housing group from Langley. They needed provincial funding. We came up with a plan. We gave it to the planners. It took months to get reviewed. We got comments. They liked what we had. So then we kept going down the path, but we had to wait for the provincial funding to come in. And the provincial funding was delayed. And we finally got comments back on round 2 from planning, and they had completely changed what they had provided us before, and it added ESA areas, new roads, and it basically took away 10% of our density. And we decided at that time to drop the project. About 3 days later, the provincial government came through with funding for the nonprofit. So this is a case of, in my view, what I would call a broken bureaucracy, where you can get an approval or get a good guideline for 6 months earlier, and then they completely change, and it effectively killed the project. And there was a little resentment after we let them know that we were backing away, and but we haven't heard anything from them since. So I think that there's a lot of stories like that, and it's really unfortunate.
Are you experiencing the same, Beau?
Is this on? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Experiencing the same. I think, overall, what Neil's talking about is layering of policies and the increased complexity that we do business in terms of framework that we do business in. And I would argue that the layers of policy have become so complex that we are unable to move. To drill down into a specific example, like Neil just did, we were moving forward with a project. It's in the city of Vancouver. We launch a project into a market without having the most detailed construction drawings, and that sort of follows. But we tried to get our construction drawings to a highly detailed state so that we could get an accurate price on the project from contractors. By the time we did that, the market had shifted and prices started to come in, and they were just too high. The construction market. And so we had to value engineer the project. It took about 10 months or about a year to value engineer the project and come up with new ideas as to how we were going to get these construction costs down. In that time, the construction costs went up in the same amount that we saved in the value engineering. And then we said, okay, well, now we got to launch. Or we either launch into a market that's quite soft, or we go back and do a full redesign. If we went back and did a full redesign, we would have been subject to a new building code and higher development cost charges in the millions. So we were forced to launch into a soft market and kind of take the risk. And so far that project, frankly, it's been a disaster. We've barely, we're not even, we're not doing very well with the project. The margin is in single digits, should we even be able to absorb sales. And when I say the margin is in the single digits, I put it in this perspective or within this context. It would make more sense for us to put our capital into a GIC than it would to put into this housing project and take the risk that we're taking. And that's a pretty big statement, and I think the general public needs to understand that that's what's going on.
Bob, you, of course, pull in all the data. So you look at it from so many different perspectives. And I want to hear from, Mayor Hurley, Neil, Beau, before getting to you to get your take on where we're at in this market.
Similar to your Rudyard Kipling, Senator Daniel Patrick Monahan says we're all entitled to our own opinion, but nobody is entitled to their own facts. And I've changed that to your own data. But the number that frightens me here is the 25,000 sitting on the sidelines. You listen to Beau and you listen to Neil, and you can find that story in every municipality and in every developer's boardroom. But we're in such a pause right now, so these guys don't have certainty. And the consumer doesn't have certainty. We 2 years ago, we all talked if interest rates come down, the market will be back. We'll all be okay. Interest rates weren't enough. It's all over the news today, tariffs. There is no certainty, and talking with the guys before this, the trouble is Trump can get out of bed tomorrow and he can tell you that I like what you're doing at the border, I like what you're doing at fentanyl, I'm taking away the tariffs for now. We will live with that uncertainty for his entire term. And the 25,000 units, you go out to Surrey and there's probably another 21,000. So how do you bring those online? The minute we start to see some acceptance and we start to see some certainty, if Beau or Neil brought me into their office today, I would tell you that the end of 26 into 27, I feel that we'll be able to get back to absorption. That's a long time away. This is just a reset year that we're in this year, but how does one of those towers come on? And if I can give you absorption or I can give you price. I can't give you both. You're going to have to tuck below the market. And then you've got another 19 towers coming up behind you. You can't absorb it all. And so it's going to be a race to the bottom. So we need some intervention. Maybe Mike's going to have to give them all 20% more density so they can get the price down. But it's not a quick solution. And when you say everyone should stay in their lane, Mike, you're absolutely correct, because when there's interference, everybody thinks we're getting a silver bullet. They all think, okay, I can build 4 homes per lot. Well, that's 8 cars and 8 garbage cans. How? There's no parking on either side of the street as it is now, and you can't go underground with a 33-foot lot to put those 8 stalls in. It's cost prohibitive. So all of these silver bullets that we think are there are not. And God bless Ravi, but we need a holistic plan and treat each community completely separate. But one thing I want to say that Mike's done is on intake, if I understand it correctly. If I cross the border, I have to tick off each box or I don't make it in. 32 boxes to tick off. When you submit your plans, if you only tick off 28 of them, there's no intake. So you know exactly where you're at. You can process properly, and with no offense to the developer can never blame the city for delaying when they were the ones that didn't submit what they needed.
Blame the city for.
Yeah, I know.
We can get into that.
Okay. So I'm wandering all over, but
I'm
I
waiting
hope
for
that
Beau to
helps.
press the mic here.
Michael, how did we get here?
Well, this morning I watched the video from last year's panel discussion. And I recommend it to all of you, especially after tonight, because what you'll find is virtually everything that was said last year was said again tonight, notwithstanding the additional topic of tariffs, which hopefully we won't focus on too much. I mean, the reality is I did astonish you last year by saying a few nice things about the housing minister, because I actually do feel that he is going in the right direction. Unfortunately, like the mayor, I think in some respects he's gone too far. But the reality is, as we're going to hear tonight, that while approvals are being sped up in some municipalities, there's 25,000 approved, but developer units on the sidelines in Burnaby. There's over 44,000 units approved on the sidelines in Surrey. There are thousands of units that have been approved in Vancouver that are sitting on the sidelines, or approved in principle but have not yet gone to the final stage, because it's at that final stage when you put up the $9.3 million in community amenity contributions and other fees for that 61-unit Canby Corridor project, which if you do decide to get going, you then ask Bob to try and sell. And Bob is going to say, Michael, I'm sorry, but all of those people that Mario Canseco talked about, who said we shouldn't allow foreign investors to buy, we shouldn't allow short-term rentals, we shouldn't allow second home buyers. As a result of all of that, all of the investors have left the market. And those were the people who were at least buying during the pre-sales that all the RBC bankers in this room tonight are insisting upon. And as for the empty nesters who might be interested in buying some of the homes that, well, they are very interested in buying the homes that you want to sell and which Beau wants to sell. They just don't want to wait 3.5 years for them to be completed, because they saw that story in the Toronto Star recently of a picture of a gentleman sitting in his living room where he was saying, this unit that I bought is worth 30% less than what I paid for it 4 years ago, and he's planning to walk away from his 20% deposit. And that's part of the reality that all of us have to face right now.
It is a reality, Bob.
That unit is an extreme. We had a conference call with KingSet this morning in Toronto, and there's a distinct difference between the investor in Toronto and the investor here. It's very popular there that a realtor is given 3 floors in the building, and he goes out and sells it to investors who are looking to flip it at completion. We tend to have a buyer here that they're not speculators until the end. If the market's gone up 25 or 50%, they become speculators. If the market is relatively even, they rent it out, and they have been our rental supplier. Because it's surprising for the rental crisis here, we have no rental agencies gouging 6 months' rent to find you a place. We're a Craigslist market. But on the rental side and supply, what has shifted is downtown, take 2/3 the way up the building, so no one argues with me over price per square foot. It's $2,000 a foot. At $2,000 a foot, you're aiming to get $6 per square foot rent. Or you can go out to Surrey, or you can go to Burnaby at $11.50 a foot. You can go to Surrey at 1,000 foot and get $4 to $4.50 a foot. So why not buy 2 out there instead of 1 in here? So the investor has left that 1-bedroom market downtown permanently. That's gone. With the foreign buyer tax that Mario talks about, and everybody thinks it's so phenomenal, Carol Taylor and I fought Christy Clark tooth and nail to put in a speculation tax. Once your name goes on title, if you sell it before 3 years, in year 1, year 2, year 3 declining, but you have a heavy penalty, so that we kick investors out of the low end of the market and we create rental supply. And Christy wanted to do something that looked visibly against the Asian market. I think the foreign buyer tax has caused racism, because we're not against people from Germany buying. We're looking at color of skin. But I'm working with Carney, surprise, and I'm trying to get a rental program in where people can buy, put it into a 25-year pool, get a preferred rate from CMHC, and let's allow foreign buyers to buy it. They have to rent it out for 25 years, and it'll show the world that we are open for business. Because right now, all our levels of government are not showing that we're open for business. And I think it would be a really soft point, and maybe as Trump goes the other way, that we start to get into targeted immigration. If we need nurses, let's bring in nurses. If we need unskilled labor, let's bring in unskilled labor. But I think if we get a creative housing program, because we're seeing with the data from Mario that people want to marry immigration to housing supply. We are going into the next 2 years, first time since Confederation, negative population growth. When you take deaths and births less with lower immigration, that's not how you're going to grow a country. I need somebody to pay taxes and bring me a bedpan in 20 years, but if we're not bringing people in, we don't have it. So I think a lot of these sound bites and simple solutions we just have to start looking at much more holistically.
So one of the concepts, of course, that you touched on earlier, Bob, and was brought in was, okay, now you can build a fourplex on what had been a single family unit. What's the impact on the municipality if people start actually doing that in numbers, Mike? No, Mike Hurley, sorry. You're Michael, you're Mike.
All right, so sounds wonderful. Yeah, it sounds like it can be an easy solution to getting housing, but that housing will also never be affordable, and I can go through that with you if you want, because I've run the numbers. But for a municipality, we work on our official community plan. Our official community plan tells us where we need to build infrastructure to meet the needs. And over the years, Burnaby has developed 4 town centers. That's where you see many high rises and around the SkyTrain stations. And we have really invested heavily in the infrastructure in those areas to accommodate all what's going on. Now, if you all of a sudden have a free-for-all all over the city for where, homes can be built, 6plexes, 4plexes, well, now we need to start changing all the pipes in the ground to adjust for that and all the other things that are needed to accommodate that. So instead of doing it in a planned way, now we can't prevent anyone from doing it anywhere in the city, as long as you meet the terms. So for that, we have figured it out with our engineering department, for every 100 meters that we have to change all that underground structure, that's $1 million. I want you to think about—
For every 100 meters?
For every 100 meters, that's $1 million. That's money that has to be found, and just to accommodate 4plexes and 6plexes. And I don't think provincial government really talked to us or asked city planners and people who know about these things about how that affects how a city's run. So while it sounds like a good idea, the practicality of it all is not so much.
It's not practical, is it, Neil?
It's not what?
Practical. It's not. You're not even going to enter into that space.
Listen, it's
are
an
you?
active.
He won't do a project.
It's an
that's
act of
400
desperation, but
units.
what I think will happen is municipalities will try to pass on those costs to the homeowner or the developer who's ever going to do it, because that's the only way they can make it work. And I think what Mike says about affordability of those buildings will be very expensive to build because they're just more complicated than a traditional fourplex within a townhouse community. But again, we got turned down for a townhouse community way out in Mission, and guess what? We have a 17 lot subdivision. We're going to design a fourplex, and we're going to show the city what it looks like. And because we're allowed to do that, but it would have been way better to have the place all townhomes. But these are the issues that are forcing developers to do things that we don't want to do it, but it's our only way to exit this land.
I'd just like to speak to the cost of building a fourplex on a single-family lot. A single-family lot in Burnaby, you'll still have to sell each of those units for about 1.8 million. So where's the affordability? I mean, it's for first-time home buyers, that's still a lot of money.
Bob? No.
I did my last talk for the UDI. I'm getting old and slowing down in 2016. And what my suggestion was, if I owned the city of Vancouver, this ties in, I would take from Main Street to Boundary and from 41st to Hastings, and I'd rezone it all townhomes. But decant only 5% of each area per year. But with the 4 lots, 4 per lot, what you should be doing is 2 or 3 on one lot. If you put 2 lots together, maybe you can do 9. If you put 3 lots together, you can do 40. And if you put 4 lots together, because this spot zoning of 4 everywhere, it'll be impossible throughout history to ever consolidate, because nobody is going to pay for that one lot that has 4 or 6 homes when you want to go put services in the community, when you want to put in density. So there's nothing orderly to it. But had you allowed 2 or 3 townhomes and then move it to 6 or 8 and then move it to 9 or 10 and then move it to 40, you would see people doing smart development and gradual, under a community plan, consolidation. But right now, the whole market reads it as, what's a lot in the government road area worth? 3 million? Yeah. So you take a $3 million lot and you chop it into 4 and you go, well, they're $750 each. No, now they're each worth $1.2 million because I could never get a lot for that price in the area. And it doesn't solve affordability. It's not aiming where we should be.
Michael, you want to jump in?
Well, I did 2 of them.
I know you
two
did, yeah.
4-lot developments in West Vancouver, and if anybody's watching now, I hope they'll agree that they turned out very nicely.
But in Canada.
And I had trouble selling them.
Oh.
And I had trouble selling them because one thing I discovered, which nobody talks about, is not everybody wants to live in a 4-lot condominium where the president of the condominium association really wanted to be Prime Minister of Canada, but ended up as the president of the 4-lot strata. The other thing I discovered in the city of Vancouver, if anybody's thinking of doing that, well, the city of Vancouver did decide, and Beau can comment on this, that if you build a development and you have unsold inventory, provided the development has 5 homes or more, then that unsold inventory, you can take your time and sell it when the market is right. But if you do 4 units on one lot, and they are unsold for 6 months, you now have to pay the empty home tax at 3% of the assessed value. And so Ken Sim and anybody else from the city of Vancouver who's watching tonight, I'm coming forward to council to urge you to change that policy, because why would anybody take a chance on building 4 homes on one lot and end up having to pay the empty home tax if they can't be sold within 6 months?
Beau, you're also in the purpose-built rental market, and you're building buildings. Do you face these same threats?
Well, I mean, I don't, as far as the empty homes tax, we do not face that threat with purpose-built rental. I'm very familiar with the empty homes tax because we launched a campaign to get rid of it for developments that were over 4 homes, I guess. But, we sit here and we're talking about taxes, and we've tried all these demand-side measures to help figure out, affordability. And nothing's worked, right? And so now I think it's widely accepted that it's a supply problem. But I'm moving on to it being a cost of delivery problem. We have a cost of delivery crisis in our country. And when, and Mike, who we get along quite well, but I do disagree with you.
Sometimes.
Yeah, I disagree with you from time to time. I do think that the municipalities can do more with the cost of delivery, and we can talk about development cost charges. And there's a really big conversation there, and there needs to be fairness to municipalities, and there needs to be fairness to developers and new homeowners. But I think the big thing right now that I'm more focused on is capital. And so Bob was kind of talking about, foreign investors and things like that. And all of this is really about capital. Fraser Institute just released a report about 2 weeks ago that suggests that if we're to meet CMHC's sort of suggested number of homes that are to be built by 2031, which is 3.5 million homes extra, more than we already build, it will take, depending on the scenario, $1.3 to $1.6 trillion in capital. 1.3 to 1.6 trillion. That's $300 billion a year in extra capital that is currently not in the system. And to put that in context, trusteed pension funds in Canada are valued at about 2.2 trillion. And all of that capital is allocated. And so I think we can talk about the fourplexes on single family lots. We can talk about prefabricated homes. And we can talk about mass timber. And we can talk about a catalog of homes that are pre-approved that get dispersed amongst the provinces and municipalities. Where is the capital coming from? That is the elephant in the room, and we need that. That problem is receiving insufficient attention and dialogue.
Well,
and I didn't answer your question about purpose-built rental, but I wanted to go.
Well, actually, I recorded a comment from AJ DeLille from RBC the other day, and he said, we have money, but it's sitting there right now. Can you, Arv, can you roll the developers are more pessimistic than bankers clip?
A very interesting time in the market. I would say it's been a slower time. Lots of projects kind of being postponed or canceled on the development side. That being said, it's very rare that a developer is more pessimistic than a banker, and I would say that that's kind of what's happening these days. We are pretty optimistic on kind of the medium to long term. We're projecting the market to kind of pick back up a little bit this year as far as the resale activity goes. So I think the RBC Economics is somewhere around 87,000 resale units in BC. That's about 10,000 more than last year and then the year before that. Coupled with interest rates cuts that are coming, a couple have already come through and we're expecting a whole bunch more of those, probably down to about 2% policy rate next year, by maybe mid 2025. So that's the good news story, and you can also throw in there people are making more money. So the data that we have is showing kind of medium households are making 4.5% more than they did last year. So that makes real estate more affordable as well. So you got your interest rates, you've got your medium households making more money.
So it's really interesting. He does say we're more optimistic about where things are going than what I've been hearing from the panel here. Mike, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I did want to comment on a kind of a tip that Beau gave me there. He said, Burnaby could do more on development cost charges and ACC charges. Well, up until these government changes, we didn't have development cost charges or ACC charges. We had density bonus that was working very, very well for Burnaby, and it must have been for developers too, because a lot of things were getting built, and it was very successful. And correct me if I'm wrong, but UDI lobbied the government to not allow density bonusing anymore and forced us to go to DCCs and ACCs, which really is not somewhere where we wanted to go at all. And that's why I'm talking about the one size fits all, because we're now forced to go to DCCs, ACCs, which we have never done, and we're still trying to understand them, frankly, and I'm not sure the government quite fully understands them yet. So, yeah, maybe there is more we can do, but we have to figure out where this is all going to. So,
I think what the industry lobbied for was certainty. right? And so most municipalities were engaging in extracting community amenity contributions. And again, growth should pay for its fair share of growth, right? Nobody is disputing that. I think what ended up happening is we sort of lost sight of what is fair and what is proportionate share. And municipalities, City of Municipality, we've been in 2-3 year CAC negotiations with City of Municipality. I've struggled with City of Burnaby and the density bonus payments. Port Moody, it's a negotiation. Coquitlam has a system. Maple Ridge has a system. And what we lobbied for as industry was to create a standardized system that created certainty and predictability, because we were going and acquiring a piece of land and then entering this prolonged negotiation. Burnaby wasn't necessarily a negotiation. I acknowledge that there were some different problems there, but in many cities, a prolonged negotiation that was with a negotiating partner that had the benefit of time and no skin in the game. And so that's what the industry lobbied for. I agree, Mike. It hasn't worked out. I don't know where the ACC thing sits either. I don't understand what the next steps are there. So I agree with that.
So this is all brand new to Burnaby, like we never had it. So we're just putting our toe in the market now too and figuring out where it is. So the certainty thing is not so certain.
Yeah. Bob, Neil, then Michael.
As we all talk about how to create the product, I think we should back up. One of the things he said is there's lots of money, and a number. Where does this buyer get the money? It used to be that it took you 25 years to pay off a home. I know it sounds glib. Now it takes you 25 years to save up a down payment. But if you look at the aging baby boomer, look at 55 years plus, they're sitting on about $330 billion in clear title housing. If you're over 75, about $114 billion of that is in the hands of over 75-year-olds. This is just in Greater Vancouver. That money was only worth, in 2006, $66 billion, and it's grown to $330 billion. So that's where your grandparents and your parents are looking at transferring the money while they're alive and see their kids survive. That's a lot of money that can come into the market, but not everybody has those parents. But as we all figure out how to build it and the taxes, etc., just these ones I didn't memorize, but the baby boomer who was a millennial age in 1986, average income was $23,000. That's gone up 103% to, in our region, around $48,000. But homes have gone up $629,000. There is no solution to that without allowing you, when you want to build 100 townhomes in Mission, go no, but if you build 250, we might look at it. Like we have to get to those sort of solutions, but when Beau and Neil go into a lot of municipalities, it's, yes, credit to a community plan, but what can we do when we're targeting the type of housing and start targeting price levels? Because that guy can't get in the market without a rich mom and dad. It's absolutely impossible. And, we all went crazy over inflation, and the cost of living was, inflation was hitting 9%. But if you're earning $60,000 a year, inflation in your household is 29%. But we're figuring out this end. And then one other thing I think we should do, so that maybe provincial governments and federal government step up and help municipalities, is if the front page of a contract said you just bought a home for $638,000, but these are the costs that have been levied against it. Your real cost was $432, because when Beau and Neil complain, they're just a greedy developer. But when the consumer complains, you're talking single digit. You may as well put your money back in this guy's bank. These are the things we're up against. But I think we have to look at the fundamentals of the consumer, where we all solve our elite problems. They're going, I can't get in the market. I can't save up $60,000. How? So I'll leave it at that.
Neil.
I'll make a couple of comments here, but 10 or 15 years ago, Greater Vancouver, the problem that we had is there was not enough development sites. We had the mountains, we had the oceans, and we had zoning constraints, and there was a real lack of supply of places that you could build. So we bid lots for the land, we overpaid to win a site, we did all that. And fast forward now, the one thing that the NDP has done is they've created an environment where there is absolutely no shortage of supply. And whether it's the West Broadway corridor, downtown, everything has been upzoned. And so now what we have a problem is we have too much land, and building just on what Beau said about a cost crisis, land prices, the vendors still want too much. And so we can't make numbers work. And I believe we're in the middle of a drastic reset in land prices. And it's the same, in Burnaby, Richmond, wherever we are. And one other comment is the density, the prices for density that we would pay, for example, in Burnaby. Most cities are keeping their density prices too high. They're using appraisals from a year and a half ago. And it's only now recently that we're getting a more realistic approach on those prices. So it's taking a long time to sort of figure this out. And I feel like we're sort of marching our way to the bottom where we can now try to pencil out deals with cheaper land, and if we can get faster approvals. But we've got the interest rates for buyers, but Bob's pointed out they got no money, right? And we've lost the investor buyer, and it's just really hard to be in our business right now and build a new project and make a return that's warranted for the risk that we take. And there's so many moving parts in home building. It's a struggle. And Bob, I would like to think that we're not waiting till the end of 2026 to have a rebound. I'm sorry. And maybe it's true, but listen, I think we need parents to come together, right? Like to say, we are going to find a way to take equity out of our homes to get our kids into the housing market. We're seeing that now. We're starting to see it a lot more. But as for pre-selling a high-rise tower in Burnaby, it's almost impossible today. There's no investors. Michael said empty nesters, they won't wait. And first-time home buyers don't have the deposits. So we're kind of stuck. And I think we're going to see a building inventory of stagnant sites across the Lower Mainland throughout the course of this year.
Michael.
So I got into this business in 1972. And that year, there were 248,000 homes built across Canada. And last year, there were 228,000 homes. Now, some of you will say, well, that's not bad. The numbers are pretty consistent. But you have to remember, in 1972, there were about 22 million people in Canada. And last year, there were almost double that at 44 million. My point is, we're simply not building enough homes. But there is an issue here that I think needs to be broadly discussed. And I know we're confusing some people when we talk about ACCs, DCCs, and CACs. I mean, for us, this is our bread and butter. But what we're really talking about is who finances growth. Does society finance growth? Because there are advantages to having more homes, more affordable homes. Or do we continue with a system that we've created now where, ironically, the people who are financing growth are the people who don't have homes, while the people who do have homes sit back and watch? And that's effectively what happens when you are paying $9.3 million in municipal fees, including permits, for a 61-unit condominium on Cambie Street, where not only are you paying that money, that includes the fact that you're being asked as a developer to pay for the new traffic light at the corner of 27th and Cambie. And when you question the amount of $550,000 and notice that 3 other developers on 3 other corners are also being asked to finance that traffic light, and then you're told, well, since you're the first developer, you have to pay the full amount, but you can sign a legal agreement so that you can get the other money back from the other 3 developers. That's why projects are not proceeding. We need to bring some common sense back, because right now, the reality is, as we're hearing from the panel, a lot of people simply can't afford these homes because the developer's not paying these costs. He's passing it on to the new home buyers, or in many instances, the renters. And I believe that's one of the reasons why we're only building half the number of homes today, Stu, that we were building 52 years ago. And we need to go back and finance infrastructure the way we did it then, because that way the costs are more broadly shared. And The one thing that I mentioned last year, and I think it holds true this year, as Bob Rennie says, when that new condo costs $1,400 a foot because of all the municipal costs and the land costs and the construction costs, essentially that brings up the cost of all the existing housing as well, because a rising tide lifts all boats.
So we talk about the new home market, but rental has to play a very important role here. Beau, I know that you are involved in some purpose-built rental towers, which is something that we haven't been seeing much of. So much of the rental supply has come from foreign investors or those who want to get a property and make it part of a family trust. I have a quick question here from Mark Goodman, where he asks all of you a question about what you think could be done. RF, can you please roll that clip? It's very short, so.
What policy change will have the biggest impact for delivering rental housing throughout the region?
It's a simple question, but is there an easy answer? I'd like to hear from all of you.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah.
I think I'm actually going to not say a policy change. I'm going to say a continuation of policy. So we are one of CMHC's largest partners on the West Coast, where we converted about over 1,100 condo units into purpose-built rental through CMHC's RCFI program, which stands for Rental Construction Financing Initiative, which is now they've changed it to a new acronym. That program that has been widely adopted by many people and groups in Canada building purpose-built rental has delivered more purpose-built rental over the last several decades than any other program that has been put forward. And essentially, it's a low interest rate loan program where the loans are on the Canada's balance sheet effectively. But these are not grants. These are loans that need to be paid back with interest. So as a policy continuation rather than a new policy, I would put that forward, Mark. I would advocate for the government tripling and quadrupling the capital that is made available for that program to stimulate the supply of purpose-built rental.
Bob?
But it is working. Mark's right here, but he's on the screen. but it is working when you look at, in the city of Vancouver, you go across the Bard Street Bridge, I think the first 1,600 units are coming up at Sanok, 6,000 units, 700 parking stalls not on transit. They're pro forma $610 a foot. They're going to end up around $540. You look at PCI at Broadway and Granville. I walk the White Spot a lot of mornings from Granville Island down to Larch and Broadway, and I take different avenues. There's probably 20 towers in that neighborhood proposed for rental. 6 of them won't go ahead because it doesn't work, because rates are dropping from the $6 down to into the $540 range, and it doesn't work when you like a broken record on it, but if you take tariffs and you take the STEP program, I always say it wrong, and you take seismic, if each of those adds 3% to the cost of construction, maybe one adds 10, the other adds 0, but I'm trying to be conservative with my number. That's 10% of construction costs. Rates are going this way. So the rental supply has worked. We're not admitting it, but it has worked. I think as we get out to Burnaby and you get out to Surrey, that $4 is working with incomes. So the $6 in town did its work to get those rents up, but now in town is coming off. So policy is working. If we get more supply, if it goes below $5 per foot, none of these guys will build one.
In other words, it's catch-22. I've been trying to explain to people that the rental market in the lower mainland's like catch-22, and everybody's too young to even remember that book.
Kurt Vonnegut.
But the irony is, and I think Bob is absolutely right.
Wait, can you say that again, Michael? Because he's never said that in his life.
Bob is always right. The point is, we are, in fact, my question is not what policy change do we need to encourage the supply of rental housing. My concern is we're probably building too much rental housing in a way, because effectively we're doing exactly what everybody wanted us to do. Let's increase the supply so we can bring down rents, and rents are coming down. And I do believe they'll go down even further than what Bob said. But the point is, as they come down, then the new rental projects are no longer viable. My question, Mark, is what should be the policy change to encourage the supply of ownership housing? Because as you heard from Beau, when he says I've converted 1,400 or thousands of units from condo to rental. What he means is these were going to be ownership developments. But because of the reasons I suggested earlier, we're losing the investors, pre-sale buyers don't want to wait so long, there's uncertainty in the market and so forth. And the lenders are insisting on pre-sales of 60% of the homes before you can start construction. It's too much uncertainty. Many of my clients are also saying, I don't want to take the risk of building ownership housing anymore. I want to just build rental. I'll build rental. Meanwhile, they'll soon be competing with the city of Vancouver, Bob, who are going to start building rental housing.
But, you know, this only data, there's a cultural shift of people staying at home a lot longer. And these numbers sound very small, I didn't memorize them. But in Canada, we've gone from 2.47 people per household to 2.5, and in BC from 2.43 to 2.46. It sounds like nothing, but this is since 2021, and it's caused BC to have to build 28,000 less homes, and Canada 180,000 less homes, because kids can't leave the house. So when you start to look at the family makeup and the difference out there, and we're using old school metrics as opposed to really understanding the culture of how we live, it really interests me of how people can get into the market when we discuss wages, etc. You see rental coming off, so these guys aren't going to build it anymore, and yet we're going to need rental to get these people out of the house. So it is your catch-22.
Neil, are you wanting to jump in on this?
I'll just say on the rental, we don't build a lot of it, but market forces are working, right? You raise the supply, lower the costs, and everyone said, now nothing works. And I think it's, in the condo side, the biggest question I have is if we had over 300,000 people move to BC or Greater Vancouver primarily in the last 2 years, and they're not buying condos, and they're not necessarily renting new apartments because there's an affordability crisis on new apartments, where are they living? And Bob, I'd like to think that 0.3 stat isn't enough to cover off that many people. But to me, it's a big mystery because they're not buying and they can't afford the rents. Where are they?
So we're going to run out of time because you guys all talk too much, which is fantastic. I mean, it's been exciting, but I'd like closing thoughts from you. What do the next 12 months look like from your perspective? I'll come down, starting with you, Michael, and just down the panel.
Well, I'd like to raise a topic we haven't discussed at all. I remember when I was at CMHC, Bill Tarron, who was the president at the time, came into our office and he said, guys, how many homes did we build in Canada last year? And we all sort of looked at each other and 220,000. And then he said, how many existing homes are there in Canada? And none of us knew. So my parting words are that while I think this conversation about how to increase the supply of new homes is important, I'd like to touch and close on the topic of how do we make better use of the housing stock we already have. I've often talked about the fact that while we're talking about empty home taxes, the reality is there are literally hundreds of thousands of empty bedrooms in Metro Vancouver. And I would love to see more programs that encourage home sharing, that encourage making better use of the existing stock. The co-ops that I approved on the South Shore of False Creek in 1974 and 75, the family moved out, the husband died, and yet in many instances, not a lot, but some instances, that single mother is still living in a 2 or 3 bedroom townhouse. We need to encourage her to move out of that home or to share it with 2 other people to just simply start making better use of existing stock. And Rob Turnbull's here, and he's also promoting this notion of home sharing, looking at home sharing registries. I think there's tremendous potential there, whether it's seniors living with other seniors like the Golden Girls or multi-generational. That's what would be wonderful.
Okay,
Michael,
so Bob just can't,
Michael,
he has to jump the queue.
You're on the verge of an empty bedroom tax. I'd be very, very careful.
I'll just say about the condo market is I hope that like the rental market we can find equilibrium. I think it's going to be a very challenging year for home builders. in order for us to find buyers for our homes, we're going to have to give up a lot. And basically, we're going to be doing that so that we can repatriate our capital and get it into the next project. Because right now, it is just punishing all builders to try and sell new homes.
Mayor Hurley.
Yeah, and I agree that it's going to be a very tough year, I think, for development, for builders. We're seeing quite a pullback within the city. But I think what you're hearing here tonight and what I've always kind of said, there's no panacea. And until we can all sit down in the same room and come up with some real solutions, and I mean the three levels of government who don't even talk to each other most of the time, or understand what each other's needs are. But I'll just close with and I noticed up there municipalities are taking a beating because of the way they were demonized over the last couple of years of being the fault for everything that's wrong in housing, which is completely false. But municipalities get 9% of the overall tax. We're being asked to do more and more and more with less, and so that's going to be very difficult. But I just say there's no simple panacea to any of this, and we're all going to have to work together to get through a difficult time.
I think for 2025, I'd like to try and reframe the conversation back to, from an affordability crisis to a cost of delivery crisis. I think 2025 should be a year of sort of education. All of those policies and taxes that you brought up at the beginning of this conversation that Mario Canseco was talking about and the popularity of them, I find that completely ironic because all of those policies are contributing to housing becoming unviable to deliver. Right? And I think we have to have an honest conversation about that. We need to stop making political decisions and we need to start making practical decisions because it's a cost of delivery crisis and we have to talk about that, right? We recently did a study where if you gave me free land and I didn't take any profit margin in the downtown core of the city of Vancouver, it would still be over $1 million for a 2-bedroom unit. Free land, no profit margin, over $1 million. That is a cost of delivery crisis. That is not an affordability crisis.
I remember when Evelyn held up a sign about 2010 or 11, can't buy a house under $1 million in Vancouver. And Gregor Robertson phoned me and said, will you have a discussion with her? I said, no, she sent out a buy order. She didn't send out a sell order. And those things cause problems. But on what Beau said, if we believe what we're all talking about here is that construction costs, it's cost prohibitive almost with free land to make things work. I think our industry has a duty to educate the consumer that you will never be able to buy at the prices that standing inventory is at right now. You look at Nat Boza has 211 units sitting on the water in New Westminster. He has to pay property taxes on that, strata fees, maintenance on that building. Neil has standing inventory, you have standing inventory. You can't replace that you can't rebuild it for the same cost you're offering it for. And I think if our industry gets that through, that if you think you're going to buy in the next 2 years, this might be the best time when it looks really scary on the standing inventory. We clear that up, and then we will start to get back to supply, because home ownership supply is what we're lacking. Everyone's gone rental. Broadway Corridor, I think it's either 6 or 8 buildings out of 40-odd buildings that are for home ownership. The rest are for rental. So that's all I have to say, but it is really exciting to sit with you guys. Thank you.
This has been a very exciting panel. You all impressed me with, number one, your passion for the industry, for solving housing challenges that so many people have. And I'm overwhelmed by the level of ingenuity that has to go into the thinking around financing and navigating your way through regulations and working out how can you get construction costs that are going to make these projects viable. It's good to know that there's great minds at work, but it's got to be challenging. I thank you all for your dedication to it, for being here tonight, and for joining us here on Conversations Live. Before you go, you all get to take the coveted Conversations Live mug home with you. Thank you very much. And to all of you, join us back here in 3 weeks when we're going to be looking at food. Can we have secure supply? Is it, reliable and affordable? We'll see you on March 25th back here at Conversations Live at 6 p.m. on the 25th. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into Conversations Live, an Oh Boy Productions program. If you enjoyed this conversation, you can find our previous and upcoming episodes at conversationslive.ca. You can also follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. Again, thank you. I'm Stuart McNish.